Welcome to the Fraudcast. This is a weekly get-together that we host for folks in the e-commerce fraud and risk space to come together and talk about the latest happenings in e-commerce fraud. There's a really great group of people that come together week over week. It's a really great place to get advice about specific things that you're working on or challenges that you're working through in your day-to-day. It's a really great place to also hear some stories. Every week, Vito is going to come into these sessions and kind of get us kicked off with a little bit of food for thought. A lot of the times recently, it's been something that we've mentioned in a previous Fraudcast session that we're like, oh yes, that's a great idea. Let's hone in on that a little bit more. So we're going to be doing that a little bit today. But really anything is fair game. So if you're coming into these sessions, with something top of mind that you're working on or a question, a challenge that you're trying to get through, this is a really great place to utilize this group of folks who may be going through the same challenges of you, have been through them before, and have some things to share and can give you some new perspectives or things to consider. So definitely utilize this community of folks while we're here in this space. Like I said, it's a weekly get together that we have here. So with that being said, just a couple of things, housekeeping. There's a few different ways that you can participate during the session. Of course, you can post in the chat. There is an anonymous Q&A function in your Zoom menu if you would prefer for any question to remain anonymous for whatever reason. Vito will go ahead and make sure that we could try to address that during the session. And then of course, please, if you're able to, come on camera, come off mute and be part of the conversation with us. We're okay with interruptions and things like that. Or if you prefer, you could raise your hand. That's okay too. So those are the different ways that you can participate. But with that being said, I'm going to kick things off to your host, Vito.
What is up, everybody? It's so good to see you. My favorite time of the week. Hope it's up there for you. I know Slack's down, so you're not doing anything today, right? You're just kind of hanging out, right? Having a little snow day. That's a lot of fun, right? So thanks for coming out on the snow day here. Before we get going, I'm kind of a square. I'm not the most party guy, but I'm ready to party. And I'm throwing this in the chat right here. I'm going to MRC. This is my first MRC. I've got 2 sessions on Tuesday and Wednesday. We're doing live Fraudcast there. And then Wednesday afternoon at the buffet hour of 4:45 when everyone's stomachs are rumbling and maybe their heads are hurting from too many libations, I'm going to be talking. So if you're also going, I'd love to see you throw a slot machine emoji or something else into the chat, just to know who's up, because I just want to see my people there, and y'all are my people. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Hoping to see you there. And if you're not making it, I do have one slide in here in what we're going to kind of talk about. That's a little bit of a sneak peek, for those of you who can't make the Bella Jornada out to Vegas, as we say in Northern New Jersey. But enough of me yapping here. Let's get into what we're talking about today. And today is a Shelly day. As we remember, Shelly brought up the fact that there was a lot of stuff going on with the private relay email addresses, a lot of user account management issues around the Apple iCloud private relay addresses. So let's talk that. Not trying to be too snide here. I do appreciate privacy. I think if this was 6 hours long, we could have an accurate conversation about where we're at as a culture, where we're at as a people, what's down the pipeline in terms of digital identity and all of that. But Apple's private relay has definitely given us some interesting problems nowadays, especially in the realm of account management, especially when we got people signing up for our account through private relay, and then maybe they use a new device and they sign up again, and then they don't even know they've got the multiple subscriptions, and then we get those chargebacks. It could be a little bit of a headache, right? So we're going to look at the rise of the privacy conscious consumer. I've got some data here to kind of arm you with those conversations, because everyone's conversation at everyone's unique business is going to be a little bit different. But hopefully you can lean on some of the stuff I show you today. And you Scouts Honor, I wasn't a Boy Scout. I think it's this instead of, I don't know, Scouts Honor from me to you. If there's something further that you think would help fuel that conversation for you, reach out to me and I can give you that. So let's talk. What's going on? This is my MRC spoiler alert deck right here. This is the one slide from MRC. This year alone in 2025, 5 new states, the ones in purple here, have come online with their own version of the CCPA, the Consumer Privacy Act in California. The blue ones already have their own privacy laws, and more are coming down the pipeline. I think another 10 are set to go into effect by New Year's in 2026. So everyone is kind of getting hip to the fact that their data is being sold and used in ways that they don't want it to be used. And, I know my dad, who's like a lunch pail guy. He works underground. He lost his finger at his job. He's just a regular Joe. He's like, Vito, what the heck's up with this? Like, I got to start using a VPN or something. What is that? So everyone's talking about it. And I think, legislation is perhaps upstream from culture or whatever it is. People are just kind of coming to the realization. When I say people, I mean regular people, not nerds like us. Regular people are coming to the realization that they want to go private. And Apple makes that so easy, right? And it makes it easy in 2 ways. You probably know this already. I am a Samsung boy, though. I'm a Samsung boy. But yes, I see some Samsung folks in the room here. If you're not familiar with it, it's so simple to do on your phone, and it does 2 things for you. Number one, it gives you this funky email address that I'm sure all of you have seen. It'll be something up to 32 characters of a blob, kind of gibberish. The domain is at privaterelay.apple.id, and it'll last forever. Okay, they're not going to refresh that string on you unless, and plenty of people do this, as I'll show you in a little bit, unless you deactivate it and reactivate it again, which kind of gives you a new one, which is a real, I know we're all smiling to think that someone can easily flip that. That makes life so great, right? It doesn't keep you up at night at all. And here's a bunch of nerdy stuff. I'm not a networks guy at all, but this is how the second part works. The second part is they put you on a proxy IP. Okay. And if you're just kind of doing some basic detection around whether an IP is safe or not, there's a lot of providers that do that kind of data enrichment with you. You might be getting some kind of, really egregious scores around this stuff unless they're able to discern the difference between the exit node that Apple's private relay uses versus, something like OpenVPN or something a little bit more boutique. But otherwise, it gives you a new email address. It gives you a proxy IP address. Very cool stuff, right? Well, when we look across the Signified network, 2023 going into 2024, we saw a rise in people using Apple's private relay. And this might not look like a huge rise from 1.3% of the overall traffic to 1.77% of the overall traffic. But between us, that's an additional 20 million instances of people using private relay. So 20 million is a pretty big number in my head. There's 20 million more people who are using private relay in 2024. Stay tuned for 2025. It's kind of a little early to be giving you that, but definitely more people are using it. No blank Sherlock, right? It's so easy to get to. But look at the VPN jump. This is over 150 million new people from 2023 to 2024. And that number, it's almost shocking when you look at 2025, but it's still early days. But so many more people are shifting to proxy IP, largely driven through private relay because it's so easy to get a proxy up and running now. You don't need to do any sort of behind the scenes stuff. You're not programming the VCR. You're not setting up the printer. This is just 2 clicks and you're good to go. So we're seeing more proxy IPs, more private relay emails than ever. But color me surprised that something that purports to be good for privacy is actually being used in nefarious ways by fraudsters. No way, right? Kick me off the Fraudcast right now. I'm speaking blasphemy here. There's no way people would abuse this, right? Wrong. You might think this is just a breakdown of chargebacks between 2023 and 2024 and the reason code that is applied to those claims. You might think that you'll see a lot more SNAD and INR and non-fraud reason codes by people using Apple's private relay, but lo and behold, pretty much 8 and 10, more than 8 and 10, are filing fraud chargebacks. So this is my simple way of saying there's a lot of junk coming off of private relay as well. So not only is it gumming up our works operationally and from a management perspective, but they're dangerous. They're not like, they're not blessed accounts just because they made a couple clicks. So let's get into Chef's Corner here a little bit. This is a really messy one, right? I mean, Gordon's like, what am I going to do with all this crap? What is this? What does this mean? It hurts to look at, right? When you're looking through people who've just ordered with you and now you've got this kind of stuff. Who are they? What is it, right? This is what I thought of. And I talked to people who are way smarter than me about this. And this is where we kind of wound up on. Now, I'm almost speaking directly to Shelly, but I am speaking to everybody here as well. You might be encountering these kind of problems. This is just a stepping stone. This is just the beginning of the conversation. And I know we've got a lot of inquiring minds in here, a lot of sharp people. You've probably gone down these routes already, but maybe it helps when you see him, when you see Chef Ramsay saying them and you see this beautiful field here, right? Number one, during that sign-up process, maybe there's some sort of warning or some sort of like call out. Maybe you're even saying, hey, we've seen someone like you on private relay before. This is to prevent someone who's signed up through private relay from signing up again with their own email address. Maybe there's some sort of warning that comes out there. Maybe there's some sort of prompt that says, hold on a second, bud, you're doing this on private relay. You sure you want that? Is that really what you want? Something like that, right? Number two, and this is like, I'm cringing to say this because for all the fraud hammers out there, myself included, when we think about people linking accounts, that's like ATO on steroids right there, right? Cool. Yeah, I'm going to link everyone's account to mine. I'm getting all the bonus points. It's going to be great. I'm just going to steal everybody's stuff. It's going to be awesome. But maybe if they've already signed up on private relay and a bunch of different parameters match, maybe there's some sort of verification step that goes through that allows people to kind of link the two, right? And this is in line with all of those. And maybe this should have come first. I'm knocking myself on the head here. If we come up with a business case first, say, hey, look, powers that be, in all caps, powers that be, there are hundreds and thousands of these accounts that are dupes, that have a private relay and a regular email address that are doing something like that. So if I could show you a big fat stinking number, then maybe it'll help you swallow the pill of having to do that kind of sign up prompt or that linking mechanism, so let's get that big fat number first. And finally, Spam City. If we start emailing people and saying, hey, look, it looks like you got multiple accounts there, bud. Let's try and do something to rectify that. You don't want to drive anyone to support. You don't want to drive that kind of work. That's a real kick in the bottom line, right? But some sort of email outreach, some sort of next steps as to what to do now that you've got multiple accounts here, especially if one of them already has a subscription and the other doesn't, or both have a subscription. Those could be like other parameters that you throw out there. So these are really 4 conversation starters around this. I know this is very specific to user account management, and I know this is a fraud program over here, but I think you can see the parallel, right? Because this is why we can't have nice things. And that's something that's like a mantra in this game. I've got it tattooed all around my body, right? That's gross. This is why we can't have nice things, okay? In all honesty, we are at that crossroads. And I think when we do talk to our grandchildren about where we were in 2025, they're going to be a little shocked maybe that we were maybe in the Wild West comparatively, or that things were much freer or less controlled or whatever. I think our understanding of friction is really going to change. And I think this is really one of those touchstone moments, because when we talk about prompting users to perhaps link their accounts or warning them at sign up that they've got multiple accounts, that can be seen as a frictive element. And the F word is not really taken very well in this world that we live in, and for obvious reasons. Data is going to drive those discussions. That's why I talk about that big fat number of potentially linked accounts, potential duplicates. But we have to melt hearts, right? And sometimes it's easier to melt a heart when we can convince the business that the roof is on fire, right? That's enough ground there for getting the appropriate heat level up. So a lot has been said here. I really want to dive into Shelley's use case, but tangentially to weave it all out, I'd love to hear about your own kind of dealings with the private relay email addresses, as well as the rise in proxies. Maybe you're having trouble dealing with some orders from a review perspective, a decisioning perspective that are using proxy IPs. Maybe you're seeing more good buyers go to proxy and you don't know what to do about that. So let's talk, my friends. What do you think? I'm going to go on mute for 25 seconds. I'd love to hear from you. Shelley, does that pass the sniff test? I mean, how many of those roads have you traveled already?
No, I actually think this is awesome. So there's a couple suggestions that I have laid out to my authentication team and engineers to say, hey, what are we doing on the front end, but what else are we doing on the back end? So the problem we're having is uh, for those of you who don't know, I'm at Peloton, so subscription-based situations, but you can sign up for an app-based subscription and then decide that you really, really love it and buy one of our connected fitness units. And at that point, you don't automatically upgrade to what we call our all access membership. That's a problem I'm working on. That's one of the layers. So say you signed up for the initial sub with the Apple Relay and then need to upgrade it, but you give us during the upgrade process a new email. Now you have two because you didn't tell us you did the private relay email. And so that's happening, but we're also having it on the opposite end where users have the connected fitness unit and then try to load it up on their tablet because they're, in a hotel room and it's the first time they sign on with their iOS. And then they have the Apple Relay or the private relay enabled and they don't realize that they're creating a new account until later. It should trigger when they look and see their workout history is 0, but apparently it doesn't. So we're working on different friction points to actually create. I like that you use the word friction. We're actually trying to create more friction so they pay attention. Hey, it looks like you don't have an account. Do you want to create a new one? And just don't blindly click through the process. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do on our end. But I'd love to hear about anybody others.
To be clear for everyone else here, downstream from Shelley's situation here, which sounds like a product problem, right? Downstream from that are these chargebacks that are coming through because people are subscribing maybe multiple times, and now all of a sudden they're contesting a subscription charge. And now you've got chargebacks that aren't necessarily fraudulent, but still hurt people like us when that year-end review comes around. Why the heck did you let this happen?
Yeah.
So am I painting the right picture there, Shelley?
Yeah, you have. I mean, honestly, we're forced to go in and accept these disputes, which is annoying and it creates more work. I'm getting a lot of disputes a month. And if I can reduce these, it's great. But on the other hand, think about the consumers that actually do the right thing and call us instead of just disputing the charge without letting us know. My refund reporting to look for fraud is out of control. I can't find the fraud in refunds because I have so many legitimate refunds that are being issued because of this. So, I mean, my exception-based reporting is ridiculously unuseful in this situation. So I'm getting it from both ends.
So cleaning up the user experience is also cleaning up your workflow, which is making you more efficient, which is making them happier. I hope you're listening over here, the powers that be at Shelley's workplace, because we could solve everything all at once. So please feel free to share this with them. And I say that in jest. I know you're listening. I know you're great people. Other than the Shelley Vito feedback loop here, what do y'all think about kind of the issues that you're facing, not only with iCloud, Apple Private Relay, but the rise in VPNs, the rise in privacy conscious consumers, good people who are going dark and incognito, anything like that? Matthew, I saw you come off of mute.
Yeah, Vito, I'm just wondering, in our world today, we leverage what we call third-party tools to help us make better decisions. So some of those tools could be like Ekata, Emailage, Elephant, stuff of that nature. So when you're talking about like a company like an Emailage, where I mean the premise of their organization is the email, and then you're talking about these private relay type email addresses, um, what have you seen as far as the validity of how they're identifying high risk activity um, versus these private relay emails? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I love all those people you mentioned. They have great products, right? But I sit on something that's, that's why I came here. Because if I'm looking at an IP address or an email address and I want to determine if I'm using that as my touchstone, that as my pivot point to determining good and bad, the element of expected buyer drift is absent from all of those tools, right? They're not looking at the life cycle of somebody who's kind of evolved outside of a specific signal. They're just looking at that email address. They're not really mentioning so many times, oh, well, they've got 6 other email addresses, or that, that billing address is associated with a dozen different addresses, or that buyer themselves has kind of, is a commuter perhaps and goes from, mobile to residential IPs back and forth. So my kind of bias here and my recommendation for everyone is to look at these things a bit more holistically through those broader signals that come from a provider who's got a whole lot of information around the individual, who can paint the picture of the individual versus, pinpoint the accuracy of that signal. I've seen from some of those, unfortunately, some really bad scores on good people because they're using private relay. This email is dangerous. But then when I look in my network history, this individual has made a dozen orders in the last 6 months and all of them were good. And they're doing things, they're still using that suspicious email address, still using that suspicious IP address. So when I came into this game about a decade ago, if you were on a proxy IP, it was like, whoa, okay, hacker, like slow down a little bit here. But now that mom and pop are on it, we have to really reevaluate that, which again, I'm not here too much with the signified hat on, but it takes a really broad base of data to paint a picture of somebody. And if I'm just looking at the IP address, and if I'm just looking at the email address, and if all I've got is what other people with that IP address or email address have done, like a very, very 30,000 foot view, as I showed you, there's plenty of bad actors who are on private relay. There's plenty of bad actors who are on proxy IP addresses. So they're probably going to come back to you and say, higher risk. And they're not necessarily thinking about someone's cross-network validity or the safety that they've kind of exhibited. Their actual stats, their actual real-life track record. So Matthew, I say take it a little bit with a grain of salt, and I would lean on your own network as much as possible. Maybe instead of looking at that email or IP address, I might look at that delivery address. Okay, because that can't change too much, even if they try and tumble it or whatever. And by virtue of them tumbling it, there's something else up. But they've got to ship to that one place, right? They've got to use that one credit card. You can't get around that payment instrument, right? What kind of signals have come off of those static signals? What kind of signals have come up with those static identifiers versus something like an email or an IP address that is, nebulous, moving all the time, and by virtue of Apple's iCloud private relay, easily changeable into something that is nearly invisible. I gave you a lot of words there. How does that strike to you? Because there's a little bit of a back end work that would have to be done to kind of surface that stuff, right? We might be re-examining how we do investigations, overall. If we have to now pivot to features that are built around how many times we've seen this delivery address, how many times we've seen this payment instrument, and all the kind of signals that come off of that.
Yeah, Vito. I mean, there's a lot to unpack with all of that. But what I'm wondering, and this is where all my conversations typically go, is how does it impact revenue and how does it impact chargeback losses? So as you've shown us those percentages, right? You said like 1.3 to 1.77 in the course of a year. So just roughly, let's say 40 basis points adjustment, right? Did the chargebacks climb too though? So like what I'm saying is like you and I could sit here and say maybe this is our consumers are getting smarter, or maybe we focus that way, but instead it's actually the fraudsters are leveraging it more. And so we're getting more fraud chargebacks as a result. I was just curious if there's any data around that.
Yeah, the proportionality of chargebacks for people who are using private relay and proxies has pretty much remained constant over that same time. So there's a higher adoption rate, let's just say from good actors in that case. But my fear when in terms of impacting the bottom line, my talk at MRC is really going to be about the year of the false positive. As you saw, a 30 or 40 BIP increase in privacy related, browsing patterns. Imagine a 30 to 40% decrease in your revenue because you got that trawler out there, it's picking out all the tuna, but now you're catching dolphins in there, and that's going to be an issue. If we're still using the same systems that we've done in the past, where if, like, let's say a rule-based kind of situation where if proxy IP and XYZ then decline, we're going to be declining way more people and creating way more false positives that not only reduce our revenue, but lead to, consumers kind of going away. So that's my fear, Matthew. And I think for all of us here, if we go back to our teams with this information that privacy is kind of on the rise, it needs to be couched not in fraud so much, but in declining good buyers, which is the real scary bit here. Because good money flying out the window is, if you look at the dollars and cents, is worse than fraud, right? It really is. It has way more negative downstream long-term effects than, your seasonal fraud attack or something like that. How does that sit with you?
I'm good with it, Vito. I've got a lot to chew on there, so I'm
For
good.
sure. And we're chewing this all together, and that's kind of gross, but we're working on all this together, and it's not going to end. And 2025 is going to, when we have this conversation in 2026, I think a lot of people are going to be saying, well, dang, revenue's down, but fraud didn't necessarily change from 2024. So what happened there? And I think we're going to have to do a lot of soul searching around that unless we start now before Q1 is up and saying, hey, these proxy IPs that we used to be scared of, these kind of funky email addresses that we used to fear, maybe we have to start A/B testing a little bit and accepting some more of them to see what happens. Has anyone I've seen some nods around here. I've seen some looks of consternation. What are y'all's thoughts on this? Ben, I'm happy to see that the feeding time at the zoo is over. So that's good. How have y'all had to deal with? Has anyone kind of looked at Matthew brought up Email Age and some other kind of providers giving you about a signal about or giving you an assessment of a signal like an IP address or an email address that might be negative? Has anyone kind of like double clicked into these or thought like, wait a minute, like why is everything so red bad right now? It can't be that bad.
I mean, for us, we, like a lot of this when you're looking at fraud or when chargebacks and things like that happen, you can't be so black and white with it now. It's got to be a lot of other factors, and so we started looking because, like, honestly, as everybody knows, these fraudsters are always adapting. There's probably a lot of these fraudsters that understand our business better than most of our own customers understand our business. And so they are starting to actually mimic or even our good customers' behaviors. And so, but a lot of it is just, it is something just slightly off. So yeah, if you are looking at those emails, I mean, that's only like 10% of everything compared in that total order. You got to look at all the combinations of everything else. Like maybe the email age, and then in combination with payment age or the account age, and frequency of orders. Did they use that same email and payment and IP multiple times in 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month? And so that's something that we've been really having to look into, because like we don't want to cancel a lot of those good orders and good customers, just because potentially one thing might be off. Obviously there are ones that really do stick out. I think there's one a couple of weeks ago you brought up where they had the ancd.us domain. We got hit with that for a couple of months last year, and they were doing in the tens of thousands of attempts with us. And so that one was just a big red flag where we're like, okay, guaranteed this is the bad guy. Anything coming from this, we just want auto reject. But like you're saying with this one, where people are just every day, people are trying to just be more secure with their information. We can't, do black and white like A and CD. Like we kind of have to just take a portion of it and look at the rest of the account information and, work with that.
Fantastic points, Ben. Matthew, I see you got a raised hand. Real quick, you mentioned, Ben, the kind of evolution of fraud, the industrialization of fraud, we like to call it. I don't know how many of you read the Card Pro blogs. They mostly come out of Russia, but there are just playbooks now about, hey, we need to be more normal, guys. Like we need to do things that like normal people do. So if you're being a bozo and like sticking around for 5 seconds on the page before you make your order, like you're barking up the wrong tree. Make sure that web page stays up for 5 minutes before you make an order. Make sure that you're not using some funky headless browser and you're doing things kind of normally. It might seem like that's making life a little bit harder for us, but I want to inspire all of you to trust your own networks a little bit more, right? So I would love to lean on, Jessica, I'll just call you out. If I'm at Murdoch's Ranch and Home Supply, I might want to lean on their in-network activity. I might want to maybe make a H2 2025 kind of project being, how can I better mine all of the information that I have in my domain against this? So we take good buyer A. We've seen this person with a CLTV that is outstanding. They've been around forever. Like how much have they shifted? How many different IP addresses have they used? How many different emails have they used? Like how much have we seen coming off of that delivery address? Get like some sort of like expected buyer drift profile. And then you can work with the data scientists in your life to say, hey, look, when it comes to our decisioning and stuff, are we really taking this into account? Or are we being too stringent with things that are kind of expected? Are we getting a little too conservative around people who are incorporating a new email or a new IP or something like that? Because I talked to this guy, this weirdo on the Fraudcast, and he was telling me that, it's all on the rise and it's looking like we might need to get ahead of this. Matthew, I won't steal your thunder.
Sorry, the mute button got me again. No, just a general question. As we research this and we take this back, we look for abnormalities, right? So if I'm leveraging and looking specifically for these private relay email addresses, should we always assume that when you see a private relay email, it's going to be in conjunction with the proxy IP? Is that the foundational assumption? So if I have something outside of that, let's say I've got a private relay with a fixed IP address, then that would be abnormal. So I'm just trying to understand, is what I'm saying truthful or is that wrong?
Fantastic question. According to Apple, it should be in conjunction, but I'm writing this down in my notebook right now, and I'm going to email you after this, Matthew. I am curious about how that's played out in the real world, and I'm sitting on a treasure trove of information to do that, and I will absolutely share it with you and anyone who's interested. I'm going to look at, does it have a private relay email address, and is it on proxy IP? Is that combination present? And then I'm going to run that against not only volume across the last 2 years, but chargebacks. I'm wondering if there's a subset now, and I'm glad you brought this up. I'm wondering if there's a subset of bad traffic that's perhaps disproportionate that only has the private relay email and is on a regular, residential or mobile IP. So great call out. But per Apple's support page, Once you flip that sucker on, you've got both the funky email and the proxy IP. But great call out. Stay tuned. Once I get off of this, we're jumping onto that. So awesome call out. I see we got some messages in the chat. Is it best to block Amazon blocks visitors on VPN? Would you assume that's a best practice, or would that change at some point? Yeah, I think that's definitely grounds to change. And Amazon can do those. Amazon can do one of whatever they want to do, right? They really like have the market in that way. It's surprising to me that they would do that because there are so many people who are on a VPN, right? I'm here to tell you that we need to all, as an industry, get a little more A/B testing friendly and start to think, well, maybe I got to start letting some of this through. So I am surprised to see that. That is very interesting. Shelly, I'll definitely, everyone, I'll include all of you on here. I got the chat. Everyone's jumping in on this data. WLAN, I see that you're interested in the data. If you don't mind, I don't know if you can come off mute, but I've seen you now at a couple of these. Would you like to introduce yourself to the group? Maybe not. Maybe the mute button is glued on. I know some of these companies keep the mute button glued on, but we welcome you anyway. In our waning moments here, any other questions around this? Anyone who's had any experience going down this rabbit hole before? Is anyone leading the charge currently on saying, hey, let's get some more approvals, especially in funky scenarios? Anyone going down that rabbit hole right now?
I mean, nothing really with the funky scenarios, but more just like because our fraudsters are always adapting, so you don't know what they're testing out. So what we're hoping are our slow fraud days, we try to see if we can also see what we are always approving in our review queue. And then that way, if we're going to approve those all the time, let's just have our programs that we use auto approve those, reduce our review, and then maybe that reduces the amount that we actually really want to look into to figure out, okay, is this now suspicious? Why are we now reviewing these smaller group? So on our down days, we focus on the good too. That way our good customers that are ordering continue to have a better customer experience. And then we can then shift our focus on a smaller set of data to look at.
Fantastic point there, Ben. And you got me thinking about something when we're trying to optimize those teams. For all of you, try implementing this. Run your database against this condition. And I think you might find some interesting stuff. Take buyers who transact on mobile or web and yield transactions from them that are through your phone or your chat or your support team. See people who have gone from mobile or web to support, because that's going to be a real good indicator for you that there's a bit of a frictive thing going on here, right? And I think you can really articulate value to the powers that be by saying, look how much I have whittled away at this never-ending stream of calls that are going to our call center, because that's a lost leader. That's just, eating up money right there. So as we're looking to optimize what our skeleton manual review teams are kind of looking at, we can supplement that information with how and when and why are we driving web and mobile app or non-support style people to support. What's driving that? Are they perhaps operating at a higher AOV than usual, and we're kind of balking at letting them get that $8,000, $10,000 item? Is it a frequency thing? Like, what kind of checks, what kind of rules perhaps are in place that are driving those people to our call centers? That's something to think about there. So Rodrigo, I see this is your first time here. Welcome. It's great to have you. Everyone has been fantastic today. I really do appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing so many of you at MRC. I am wondering what the group would like to cover next week. I know somebody's got a burning issue somewhere, and I am a softie. If you just kind of yell at me, I do things. So please take this opportunity to come off of mute and yell at Vito, and Vito will do whatever you ask within the legal limits. So please feel free. Jessica, you're off mute. Boom.
So I have a question, kind of. It's not really relating to the Apple relay emails. What I'm seeing a lot of is IP addresses that ping from like Phoenix, Arizona, or ping from one area. Um, but it's like there's no way it can happen. Or even like we have a customer service agent who's in Colorado and she's pinging out of New Hampshire. And so it's kind of interesting to me on how our IT team can't seem to figure out what that IP is. But with the proxy IPs, like the program we use does like pierces the proxy so we can see the device ID IP and the proxy that they're using. But I noticed that mobile is usually one that, and it's usually Apple phones, sometimes Android, but usually Apple, where it can ping all over the United States from where they're at. So it's, to me, it's kind of related to this, but not, because I think it does have a lot to do with their security, but they're not using the email, like the relay email. So I'm really confused about that, and I'm curious if other people are seeing that as well.
If other people want to jump in over me, but I will say something. I live out in the country and I've got broadband internet that runs off a satellite that pings to another tower. And I make orders and I'm sitting at Signified so I could see my own orders. My IP address was in Chicago last week. I'm in the panhandle of Texas. Makes no sense, right? So I think you have a lot of kind of new ISPs coming up, like the one that I use, Amarillo Broadband. Check it out, like, jump on it. But you have a lot of these new kind of relay ISPs that are doing that kind of work. Maybe everything kind of gets funneled into a node somewhere else. It makes life a little more difficult for us, but I think also makes the chase a little bit more fun. I think we can find a lot of good now among things that we perhaps thought was bad in the past. So,
Which it also brings me to Scamalytics. So I was actually told about Scamalytics from one of my colleagues. Her boyfriend used to work at a bank doing chargebacks, and they would use Scamalytics a lot. So I was like, okay, let's see what this is. In my opinion, they're awful. Like, it does not give valid information, and it kind of says that it's for a lot of good customers. And so, like with what you were saying, with some of them, when you're just looking at one specific, you have to be careful with that. It kind of get that big picture. But a lot of our customers are rural, so what you're saying is very valid. Like,
yeah,
for the
I got
place.
10, I got 10 chickens in the back room right now.
Yep.
I feel your pain, tis the
Yep,
season.
but yeah, Ben took himself off mute at one point too, so just wanted to throw that out there.
And Ben really painted the picture. We can't be black and white with this. I do see Danny's got a raise hand. Danny, first off, I want to welcome you to the Fraudcast. Thanks for coming out. What's up?
Hey, yeah, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Danny. I work with Harman International, and I'm their fraud and risk analyst for the US. So working specifically with the US, but I work very closely with my counterpart, Tom, who covers the EMEA. So on the topic of the IP addresses, I just want to jump in on that because that's something that I notice a lot with our risk provider or fraud tool that we're using right now. That I have expressed frustration with, because IP addresses, I think, can be very, very tricky. For instance, like a lot of our customers, so we sell through JBL, like speakers and Harman Audio, and a lot of our customers will be purchasing from out of the country, and then they'll be shipping to the US. That's the only way that they can make the purchases through the US. It's very common for our customers, but it tends to flag, as a risk indicator, potential fraud indicator for our risk provider. In addition, we also experience a lot of customers about college age, so they're using an IP address located on a college campus, and that also flags as risk. So it's been a challenge, I think, to present these issues to our risk provider and have them, I guess, basically like fully take those things into consideration when it comes to our specific customer set. So I just wanted to throw that in there. I think it's definitely a tricky topic, the IP addresses, since it can, as you mentioned, like your coworker can show in one area but not be in that area. And yeah, just wanted to add that piece and introduce myself.
Well, welcome and great addition. I think we're going to leave here with a lot of FUD, as we like to say, and maybe we could pass that FUD on to the people that sign our checks a little bit. we cannot have a single, monolithic approach to things anymore. Those days are over. And if we're just relying on data enrichers, they can get us in the ballpark, but they get us in the wrong ballpark too. And that's kind of what's happening here. So lean on the things that can't move, the things like billing and delivery address, the things like a payment instrument, and try to network out as much as you can. And always rely on your friend Vito here, because I am sitting on a treasure trove of information, and I'd love to work with you to help you kind of make life easier and not have to rely on some sort of like sliding scale of, I love when it says like kind of bad. Oh, great. Well, that makes life so easy. Might be good. Okay, cool. Tell that to my boss. That's great. But Ben, you've done so much for us, and I know we're over time, but you know what? I'm going to call you out. Triple gold star. Everyone got a double gold star today. Ben got a triple gold star. Ben, anything you want to hear about next week? Do you want to just watch a movie next week? We could do that.
You mean Lee?
Well,
Yeah, we have two Bens in the crowd now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Ben Flexner. Sorry. I apologize. Ben Lee. Ben Flexner, you got a double gold star. That joke really made me laugh. But Ben Lee got the triple gold star. Ben Lee, is there anything at all you'd like to cover next week? Anything else or do you want to kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit further with IPs? We really just want to knock IPs out of the ballpark a little bit. I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah, I'd be down for that. I mean, it's definitely something I'm not seeing that as much of. And so if this is something that's on the rise, either that to help protect good revenue, if not at least be on the preventative side. The hard part for me is just like when fraud happens, I'm always just on the reactive side. And like for me, like I'm still trying to get us on the budget to be a part of MRC. And so I want to be more on the preventative side when fraud attacks happen instead of just being on reactive.
I love it. And Ben and Ben Flexner, all the Bens and everybody here, I will jimmy open one of the doors at the convention. If you just talk to me, I'll jimmy the door open. You can just come around the back. I got you covered. I'll let you in. This is what we used to do at the movie theaters when I was a kid, right? So those are my early fraud days, but now I'm on the good side of the ball. But thank you all for coming out. Thank you for the spirited conversation. Thank you for shining a little light in my life. You guys make me so happy. I love these conversations. Feel free to reach out to me at any time from this week to next if there's anything kind of on your mind. And happy hunting, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.